Meanwhile, the nuclear talks come a little more than 7 months after the U.S. launched strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities with Operation Midnight Hammer. Let's go to Emma Withrow from the fact-check team. And Emma, let's just start with what is the status of Iran's nuclear program? Because just, thinking back, weren't most of the sites gotten rid of, wiped out in June?
Yeah, so the New York Times, they analyzed some satellite imagery of the nuclear facilities that were struck last year, and they found that a lot of these sites are actually starting to get rebuilt. So experts who investigate the Iranian nuclear and missile programs, they backed up the analysis by the Times as well. They looked at around 24 locations that got hit by Israel or the U.S., and they saw that construction has really just started at more than half of these locations. You can actually see the pictures that they got from these satellite images up on the screen right there that were posted by the Times. And also to note here, the satellite images only show what's above ground. There's really no way to determine what's happening underneath, at least what's publicly available. So that's a whole other aspect to all of this.
It's just unnerving. Many layers to this. And from the meeting in Oman between Trump cabinet members as well as Iranian officials, it's my understanding that there will be more meetings, but what about concessions?
So from my understanding and from what I researched today, there's no official deal that's been reached by any means, but we do know more clearly where Iran stands on a few of these main issues. So basically, Iran offered to dial back its nuclear program, think lowering enrichment levels and more inspections in exchange for U.S. lifting sanctions and letting their oil start to flow a little bit more again. Now, they're willing to talk nukes to get the economy moving, but they've made it pretty clear they're not going to touch their missile program or their regional alliances, which those are those terrorist proxy groups that they've been funding, like Hamas, Hezbollah for years. So we'll have to wait and see where negotiations go from here on out.
All right, Emma, thank you for your research. Later on, Emma's going to join us to dig deeper into the origins of Iran's nuclear program. Tensions between the U.S. and Iran remain high after thousands of protesters were massacred during anti-government demonstrations across Iran. But nuclear talks continue as the U.S. attempts to de-escalate a future conflict. Let's go to Emma Withrow from the fact-check team. If we look at the timeline here, Emma, didn't their nuclear program start in, the 50s, around the same time that the U.S. launched the Atoms for Peace strategy? It all happened around the same time.
Yeah, it's been happening for a long time now. It goes back decades. Like you said, according to a report published by the Congressional Research Service, Iran's nuclear program started in the 1950s, and then the United States started kind of getting concerned that Tehran might develop nuclear weapons in the mid-1970s. But then fast forward to 2003, they supposedly shut it down. So since then, U.S. and international watchdogs say Iran hasn't started a formal weapons program, but has continued to with their building of the nuclear capabilities, especially uranium enrichment, which could be used for a weapon. So that's the cause for concern there. So the distinction's important. Iran's not been caught building a bomb, but it definitely has the tools to build one.
So how close have they gotten? I mean, do they have weapons-grade uranium?
So according to the Council on Foreign Relations, Iran doesn't currently have any sort of nuclear weapon, but it's closer than ever in terms of technical capability. The CFR reports that Iran's enriched uranium to about 60%, just short of the roughly 90% needed for a nuclear weapon. U.S. and international analysis also say that Iran could produce enough weapons-grade material in just weeks or even days if it chose to, but turning that material into an actual functioning nuclear weapon could most likely take a lot longer.
Emma, thank you.
Thanks.
And for more on this fact-check team topic, including links to their sources, scan the QR code on your screen or visit thenationaldesk.com.
I'm Atra El-Nashar at the White House. Iranian officials are openly speculating about a potential conflict with the United States ahead of a meeting between President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The new comments come as the U.S. and Iran are attempting to use diplomacy to resolve disagreements about Iran's nuclear program. The United States and Iran pursuing a peaceful route to settling tensions. Both, however, making it known they're not afraid of the alternative.
We are men of diplomacy, but we are men of war, too.
The U.S. wants to prevent Iran from developing a nuclear weapon. Iran wants the U.S. to lift sanctions detrimental to its economy. The first indirect talks were mediated by Oman last week.
I think Iran looks like they want to make a deal very badly, as they should. Last time they decided maybe not to do it, but I think they probably feel differently.
President Trump referring to failed talks last year preceding U.S. strikes on Iranian nuclear sites. A spokesperson for Iran's armed forces saying this on state TV Monday.
We are not going to surrender to U.S. pressure and to U.S. Demands.
While the diplomatic process plays out, he says they stand ready to respond to potential U.S. military action, which President Trump has said is not off the table.
Certainly, this time the response will be much more decisive. We will create economic problems and issues for the United States.
When it comes to the substance of these talks, a top source of tension is Iran's ballistic missile program. Iran refuses to discuss it.
The missile is something that is defensive. We cannot talk about defensive matters, not now and not in the future.
Back in Washington, President Trump preparing to host Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House Wednesday. Netanyahu's office says the prime minister believes any negotiations must include limitations on ballistic missiles and a halting of the support for the Iranian axis. The outcome of these talks, which may resume as soon as this week, could come down to the red lines the U.S. and Iran are drawing on Iran's enrichment of nuclear material. Iran says they have the right to do this and that it's for peaceful purposes only. President Trump says it cannot be tolerated, even at the lowest level. At the White House, I'm Atra El-Nashar.